Scotty Montgomery spoke to Steve Weish of NFL Network. I believe is how you pronounce his name. Steve Weish.
Kind of like gray hair. I
Yeah.
can kind of see it, but like
Yep.
Tanner.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
He's good. He's really good. And he did an interview with Scotty Montgomery. Look at Scotty, man. Look at Sharp. And he talked about the Detroit Lions, NFC North title. And we're going to play this clip, hear what Scotty had to say, and we'll give our thoughts on it. So here's Scotty Montgomery.
Accelerator program, and you see a lot of the talent that's in the room. What is it like for you just to be among so many of your peers who have aspirations to be coordinators and head coaches?
I mean, it's a think tank. It's not just the information that we're receiving from the presenters, which they've been fantastic, but the information and the conversations that come out of some of these meetings with such high-level men, but also high-level people of football. And I think those learning experiences will take, just about everybody in there to exactly where they want to be.
Scott, you've been a head coach on the collegiate level. You've been coordinator. You've called plays. How many more boxes do you think you need to check before you get that opportunity?
For me, right now, it's really not about checking boxes, especially when you're a coach. We're just trying to find a way to continually get better and push what we do. And that's just try to coach them as well as we can possibly get them and then take them from where they are to where they want to be. But, from a box standpoint, I think that, a lot of us have, great accolades and the things that we've done. But the right situation, the right opportunity has to be presented. And when that happens, I'll be ready.
Scotty, you said something that's very important because I think a lot of people who are trying to come up jump at any opportunity. And you said the right opportunity. How much has that been stressed here? And how much do you stress that with your experience of some of these other candidates here?
Yeah, that's something that, we stress, but it's one thing that you have to learn. It's really a learned behavior that you have to go through a lot of different situations, whether they be great, whether they be not so great. But the opportunity is directly connected to the people that you're around. So that opportunity sounds great for a lot of people because it's a position, but it's really the building, the room, the places, the opportunities, and people you get to be around.
You've got a lot of experience, but in this Lions coaching staff, I mean, there's a stacked roster on your coaching staff. You got a ton of talent. You guys have had success year after year. How much has that helped you grow?
Man, iron sharpens iron. I mean, it has been wonderful to me to be able to bring the expertise that I have, merged in with, Hank, Ben, AG, but mainly Dan. For me, it's been a different level of leadership, a different type of leadership from a peer standpoint, which also gives us all the voice to be who we are. I don't have to be someone that I'm not. I'm a Duke grad. I have a certain level of belief in what I believe in, but I also can merge with people like Ben Johnson, that's a UNC grad, which should be an issue, but it's not.
I love that, man.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, this comment I can relate to a lot. Alan W. says, I like Scotty a lot. Didn't realize he was also the assistant head coach till last season. Yeah, that's something that, when he was hired, he was brought in, was the new assistant head coach, running backs coach. And we got to see Scotty Montgomery meet us three and Mike. We were all there at training camp last year, and we saw Scotty coaching the running backs, and that man can coach.
He did not want to fumble that football.
That energy.
No.
That man was screaming the whole time. Like the energy coming off Scotty Montgomery is next level.
Yeah, he's got that like aura to him where if you're by him and you're watching him, you're like, and then you listen to these like interviews, you're like that he's got. And now, he's an assistant head coach. Like that dude has he could lead an entire room. Like
you think
his presence.
You think if something happens before you go, Booner, if something happens to Hank Stram, that he would be promoted to OC?
No,
I don't know. Like Scotty, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if Scotty ends up getting like a head coaching interview at one point too, before Hank Stram does.
I think you got to look at like the hints I get right when you look at that stuff is like who's following Ben Johnson all around. It's Hank Stram,
Tanner.
So like that stuff I look at. I think Scotty,
coordinator.
I think Tanner is, and I don't know how Tanner is as a guy who like leads a room, and I obviously we don't get much of Tanner, but I know in terms of like dialing up plays, him and Ben are kind of at the hip. Scotty, I think, is more like I'll give you this: if anything happened where I would try, like if Dan was sick or whatever, let's say Dan missed a game, whatever it was, I would feel comfortable with Scotty out there. Like,
Yeah.
like
I
would
think
feel-
he's like that next man up to where if Dan gets suspended or thrown out of a game,
Like a little
it's-
hardball situation.
yeah, it's Scottie Montgomery that's probably taken over, and because he's probably side by side, I'm sure as well with Dan mostly. That I would think.
even if he wasn't, obviously he's an associate head coach, so like he would anyway. But even if he wasn't, and I'd be like, put Scotty. Like, that dude can lead. I'm cool.
Reminds
with
me
that.
of Shep. Him and
Yeah,
Shepard
well,
remind me.
Isn't that like a common theme too? With all these coaches, they're all just like leaders.
I think
they're all
the
alpha.
only one that isn't, I mean, he's obviously a leader, but I think the one that's a little bit different is definitely Mark Brunell. I think he's a little bit more laid back, and you can tell like he'd be on ass if like you're fucking up. Or
Oh yeah,
anything
I
like
feel like quarterback coaches are always more a little like, I'm not gonna like, you're working one-on-one essentially with a guy
Yeah.
instead of like a whole group of guys. Like you have that relationship where you're probably not as like, I'm gonna come at you as hard as I can here, like Scotty Montgomery will, and you know what I'm talking about.
that.
But
Yeah.
I wanted to throw this out there though real quick because just listening to the Scotty Montgomery thing, I think we should do some research heading into next week, guys, because we talk about like this Lions team and how great this roster is. I think it's kind of like quietly like thrown under the rug how good of a coaching staff Dan Campbell's put together. Like it potentially could be the best coaching staff in the whole NFL. Like genuinely, if you look at it, I wrote some of these guys down. Ben Johnson, going to be a head coach next year. Aaron Glenn, most likely head coach next year. You have Scottie Montgomery, who's potentially a future head coach. Calvin Shepard, who can take over at DC. Tanner Engstrand, who's kind of next man up for OC. Hank Fraley, who, if Ben Johnson would have gotten the Commander's job, he was going to be the OC with Ben Johnson in Washington. You have Terrell Williams, the best defensive line coach in the entire NFL that everyone says. I feel like, guys, like this is an all-star. You talk about how good this roster's built together. These guys, and I didn't even name all of the coaches. There's more to go. These guys, like Dan Campbell's put together probably the best coaching staff in the entire NFL. And I think when you have like the top 5 roster and you have one of the best all-around coaching staffs, like, dude, I named probably 1, 2, 3. There's 6 guys on your staff that probably can be coordinators in this NFL, counting the 2 coordinators that you have. And then probably in the future, you're going to see a lot of head coaches. It reminds me of some of those old, like, Washington teams where you have all those, like, head coaches on that roster at that point. And now they're all coaches in the NFL. Like, in 5 years, you're going to be like, oh, wow, this was the staff in Detroit.
I mean, the more you think about it, not that, it doesn't even matter that Dan's not like widely regarded as like, he's not the best coach in the NFL, but in terms of a complete coaching staff, like I can't think last year, both coordinators interviewed for head coaching jobs. You have the best defensive line coach in the league, and I think the assistants are very talented. I think Scottie Montgomery's a really good running backs coach. So I'd put him against anybody. And like King Horse said, I'd put him against anybody, not just in coaching, but line them up.
Yeah. That's
Mark Brunell at quarterback. Yeah, Dan Campbell at tight end. Hank Fraley, I think he's the second best offensive line coach. Yeah, out in Philly. It's a whole nother.
Give me Hank Fraley.
But Hank is up there though.
Antoine Randall on the outside.
Yeah.
Boone. Yeah, I would say they're up there. They're not swapping out coordinators every year. That happens.
That's what I was about to say. I mean, if you look, obviously you have the guys like Aubrey Pleasant who have been let go, and there's been coaches who have left, but there's not been many assistants even that have left this team. I think it's just a bunch of former players that want to get a mission accomplished, and they're not going anywhere until that. Because if you look at a lot of those former players outside of Antoine Randall, they were very solid players, but they did not win Super Bowls. Mark Brunell, really good quarterback, didn't win a Super Bowl. Calvin Shepard, really good linebacker, didn't win a Super Bowl. So when you look at that, this is their chance to go and win a Super Bowl. And that's why I think that this culture is so insulated outside of Dan Campbell as far as the coaches go as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I truly believe like a lot of these guys that I named, they're going to be like, Tanner's going to be an OC, whether it's with the Lions or someone else. He was a passing games coordinator, and he interviewed for 4 offensive coordinator jobs throughout the NFL this offseason. And he ends up staying and being like, hey, I kind of want to be the next man up after Ben. And like, we talked, Lukas said a year and a half ago, Calvin Shepard could be that next man up as the DC. Like, you're just building. And the fact that Ben Johnson and AG are staying that much longer, it helps you develop these coaches even more and even more. Because typically what happens, and I think this is a little underrated too, is, an OC or a DC right away, when they have any opportunity to take a job, boom, they're gone instantly, whether they're ready or not. These guys are like, no, I'm going to stay. Even if I'm ready, I'm going to stay. And guess what? Usually when those guys leave, some of these younger guys have to come up quicker, and they have to learn quicker, and they have to become an OC quicker and a DC quicker without maybe being ready to do it and kind of being fully ready to go. Now that you're sitting here with Ben Johnson, now Tanner's going to be with Ben Johnson. What is it, year 3 for him with him? Or maybe even year 3. And then like Kelvin Shepard's been with AG for 4 years now, I think. So like you're really learning under these guys, to where like this Dan Campbell coaching tree, it's just like developing a player. Like they're just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. That's why the Shanahan thing in Washington, like those guys stayed under Shanahan for so long, and then they moved over to the 49ers with his son. And then they all started moving with, and you start moving around, and like eventually you're going to be like, oh, I got all of this experience, I'm ready to go, instead of just jumping into it right away.
Do you think we're going to see one day like a Dan Campbell coaching tree graphic?
For sure.
Like they always say like Bill Parcells, Bill Walsh, like they have all those great legendary coaching trees, and then there's going to be a Dan Campbell one.
I think in the next 10 years, you're going to see like all these head coaches around the NFL, and they're like, they were on the Detroit Lions coaching staff. And you're like Kelvin Shepard in 10 years, head coach. Like, I would not be shocked. I wouldn't sit there and be like, whoa.
Yeah, because we even talked about yesterday with Mike Tomlin, like he's such a great head coach, but then you look at Matt Canada, and it's like, all right, there, like that was a problem for 2 seasons and wasn't addressed.
Yeah, I think with Dan, the difference is some coaches aren't as, all in on developing coordinators to be head coaches. Like I think Dan's all invested because he's so selfless. Not saying Mike Tomlin's selfish, but what I'm saying is for Dan, like he knows like Ben Johnson, AG are going to be head coaches one day. So he lets those guys kind of, it's like kind of like what Booner said. It is like developing a player a little bit. Like he helps those guys. He kind of coaches them up a little bit, gives them some advice, whatever, any questions they have, gets them in certain meetings, whatever, gives them certain freedoms. And I think that and Dan Campbell knows about that because of the coaching tree he's from and coaches that he's gotten to learn from, Parcells and Sean Payton. So I think there'll be a Dan Campbell coaching tree, and that's really with just good coaches in general. And I think them all being former players for the most part, it gives you a certain advantage, because those guys relate to players. Like it's different when you're, Aiden Hutchinson, or let's say more, for a better comparison, you're Terran Arnold and your defensive coordinator was a really good corner. Like it's different than Brandon Staley, who
my
Brandon
God,
Staley's telling you what to do.
Yeah, man it up on nobody.
Like
he came from a D3 college.
Yeah, well, and then you have a guy like Aaron Glenn who knows exactly the things that you face. I think Carlton Davis brought that up, that like AG is like he kind of gave him a lot of credit how he's intense because he's got that player still in him, but also he's just like he's relatable.